Is it just that my brain is scattered? Or did that not... That didn't make much sense in my head. Focus on Mark Benioff. Someone barely anyone's heard of. Yeah, okay, so it's not just me that felt like that was a very scrambled question. Like, the question there was all over the place. I'm so sorry. I feel like a moron right now. I feel like an absolute idiot, but I actually don't understand the question. I understood the first question just fine. Do you think the narrative is a problem? Which, of course, is a part of the problem. But the second question didn't actually make sense to me. I haven't necessarily seen this specific video, but I have a feeling that we are going to get some cringe moments. So let's do some Russell Brand. This explains a lot.
During the pandemic, we saw the biggest wealth transfer in history, but there's definitely no coordinated effort to ensure that those kind of things happen, right?
Right?
Hello there.
Okay, so what we need to know about Russell Brand. First of all, I want to say this very clearly. I've never liked Russell Brand. I've always thought that he seemed like an absolute moron, and a terrible human being. But he has always managed to disguise himself in like a left-wing persona in some ways, and I never really got that. He struck me always as like this like anti-vaxxer kind of person, very conspiratorial, very much, I don't know, it was just always something that didn't sit right with me on this guy. And I've seen him pop up on my timeline so many times lately that I decided I wanted to cover him. Russell Brand, I've seen some of his stuff lately. He seems like he does a lot of sophistry, and he alludes to a lot of conspiracy theories. Namely, he talks a lot about globalism and all that stuff, and the second people start talking about globalism in like a negative way, that should be a huge red flag, because people don't necessarily seem to understand what globalism actually is. Back in the day, it had a different term that leftists used more. Yeah, exactly. It's like a Nazi dog whistle. But back in the day, it had a different term in leftist circles that were more heavily used by leftists, and that's internationalism, which is a term I like a little bit more, but maybe it's just because people read globalism and they think about some weird conspiracy that they are never quite able to point out what exactly is. So yeah, let's see how long he can go with saying a lot of words without saying anything of substance.
Hey, you 5.7 million awakening wonders, thank you for joining me on this voyage surely towards freedom. If we're able to overcome adversity, if we're able to accept the validity of people's opposing opinions, then we will be able to create new alliances. Turn on the notification bell right now. We do a video every single day, and I want you to watch all of them so that we can share with you valuable information like this, gleaned from Peter Goodman, who's written a new book on Davos and the truth around globalist economics. Those of you that are regular viewers of this channel will be used to being condemned with the slur term conspiracy theorist, which, let's face it, ought to be retired at this.
So we're 1/10 of the way into the video, and he has so far said nothing. He has mainly just promoted his own channel, but let's see.
In this video, we talk at depth to Peter Goodman about how the wealth transfer during the pandemic truly worked and how difficult it is to interrupt, disrupt, and even oppose the opinions of the powerful. Stay to the end of the video because it's fascinating. alluded to the wealth transfer and to the mechanics that perhaps allow it, but how serious and significant was the wealth transfer that took place in the last 3 years, particularly under the pandemic conditions? Is it a real thing, or is this more drawn from the tin foil hat realm of
Oh
conspiracy?
no. Oh no, it's a real thing. I mean
Notice how he framed the question there. And also, he's talking about wealth transfer, which is a thing that lefties have been critiquing for quite some time because it's a real thing. Even Global Weirdo addressed wealth transfer briefly in the video that we just watched. So it's an easy topic to sort of get into as a leftist or someone pretending to be a leftist like Russell Brand is. So let's see what we're up against there.
economic data shows it. I mean, around the globe, something like 90% of humanity saw their livelihoods hit by this pandemic, while a handful of billionaires saw their fortunes double and in some cases triple. And the pandemic was fantastic for Bezos. We all used Amazon more than ever. How would we have gotten through the pandemic without e-commerce? Companies like Benioff's Salesforce. By the way, Benioff said at Davos, it was virtual Davos back in 2021 because of the pandemic. He said the CEOs are the real heroes of the pandemic. I mean, parse that. Not frontline medical workers.
It's not a conspiracy, it's facts. Not even right. Can't really say. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Not people emptying bedpans in senior citizens' homes or parents dealing with, kids stuck at home, distance learning. CEOs are the real heroes. And he specifically said, we gave you the vaccines and we gave you the credit through finance to keep companies going. And we did this, he said, not for profit, but to save the world. That, right there is revealing of this mindset that I think is dominant amongst the billionaires that we have to really get out from under. Now, Benioff saw his fortune grow dramatically because, his company is making the software that allows people to.
Okay, so right now, nothing that has been said so far is incorrect or something that I disagree with. But I'm interested to see in where they end up taking this. This is the problem with not pre-watching the videos, of course. Because this might end up being like the most agreeable moments of Russell Brand's career, in my opinion. And in that case, I will have done a bad job. But so far, I don't know much about this guy, anything. But so far, they're just giving like a critique of how money and wealth has transferred more upwards in society, especially with the pandemic. And this is like one-on-one stuff.
Work from home remotely. So he's the ultimate winner, and yet he ran around taking a victory lap for stakeholder capitalism at a time when most working people were more vulnerable. People lost homes, people lost jobs, and the billionaires profited dramatically, and yet he used that to take a victory lap.
Do you think that the control that's exerted over the narrative presenting the beneficiaries as heroic rather than, simply as beneficiaries, even if it wasn't replaced by a more pejorative and condemning tale,
What?
Use that to take a victory lap.
Let's take this whole.
Do you think that the control that's exerted over the narrative presenting the beneficiaries as heroic rather than, simply as beneficiaries, even if it wasn't replaced by a more pejorative and condemning tale, is part of the problem? And if you have a situation like the pandemic, which enables unprecedented wealth transfer, again, without needing to stray into conspiratorial territory, do you feel that there would be a vested interest in perpetuating the conditions, or at least seeing what further opportunities may be presented by those conditions?
Is it just that my brain is scattered, or did that not? That That didn't make much sense in my head. Focus on Mark Benioff. Someone barely anyone's heard of. Yeah, okay, so it's not just me that felt like that was a very scrambled question. Like, the question there was all over the place. Let's see if we can take this in segments. I'm sorry for subjecting you guys to this once more, but
And yet he used
see.
that to take a victory lap.
Do you think that the control that's exerted over the narrative presenting the beneficiaries as heroic rather than, you know, simply as...
Okay, so do you think that the narrative that is presenting the beneficiaries, i.e. the billionaires, as heroes...
beneficiaries, even if it wasn't replaced by a more pejorative and condemning tale, is part of the problem? And
it is part of the problem. Do you think that the narrative that paints the billionaires as heroes is part of the problem? That's basically the first part of the question here. But he asks it in a way that makes it seem like he's thought about this more. But it just... You can just ask the question a little bit more straightforward. It's fine, because that's essentially what he's asking. And... yeah. Okay. And
if you have a situation like the pandemic, which enables unprecedented wealth transfer, again, without needing to stray into conspiratorial territory, do you feel that there would be a vested interest in perpetuating the conditions, or at least seeing what further opportunities may be presented by those conditions?
that part I'm not sure I actually understand the question.
There would be a vested interest in perpetuating transfer, again, without
Okay, so
which enables unprecedented wealth transfer, again, without tail, is part of the problem. And if you have a situation
like
the
the pandemic,
which enables unprecedented wealth transfer,
okay, so if you have a situation that enables unprecedented wealth transfer,
again, without needing to stray into conspiratorial territory, do you feel that there would be a vested interest?
Do you feel like there would be a vested interest in perpetuating the conditions,
or at least seeing what further opportunities may be presented by those conditions?
I'm so sorry. I feel like a moron right now. I feel like an absolute idiot, but I actually don't understand the question. I understood the first question just fine. Do you think the narrative is a problem? Which, of course, is a part of the problem. But the second question didn't actually make sense to me. Would billionaires benefit from extending the pandemic? Oh, okay, so that might be what is asking. I guess in a monetary... Well, sooner or later, no.
You mean in terms of the pandemic itself?
Yeah, but yeah, in terms of the pandemic and the crisis more broadly, and also a sort of a template of what do I want to say? The kind of opportunities that crisis provide are sort of seen as how can they be seen as a crisis? How can something that created so much...
How does this guy have 5 million subscribers? This question contained like nothing.
Wealth and so much opportunity be regarded as a crisis? It's comparable, in fact, to what you said a minute ago as...
Holy fuck. I'm so sorry, but this was kind of extreme.
The ultimate beneficiaries. The ultimate beneficiaries of the status quo are the people that attend a conference in order to discuss how to change it.
Right.
If the ultimate beneficiaries of the pandemic saw their interests improve so radically, what incentive is there for them to address these conditions? And how are we to assume that there hasn't been anything nefarious? I'm not.
Okay. I want to address that part. How are we to assume there hasn't been anything nefarious? Do we have proof that there has been anything nefarious in ways of like how to ameliorate the crisis? I think that the billionaires as well actually do want things to get back on track, because I think they themselves realize that the boost that they have gotten in this pandemic is a temporary one. But yeah.
Not suggesting that it's necessary to provide that, but it's interesting.
He fucking loves the sound of his own voice.
Yeah, I'll say this. Let me be careful here. So I don't put any stock in the theories that have held up things like vaccination, that somehow this whole pandemic is just a creation of big government combined with big business to enable profiteering. However, there is no question that the billionaire class is well practiced in using.
That's the whole thing. Like, don't ever let a good crisis go to waste. And that's something that billionaires know. That's something like stockholders understand. And so, and it's something that I think a lot more politically minded people need to understand as well, because it's actually quite an important mindset. And when it comes to the monetary things, for example, what are some of the benefits that we can get out of a crisis like this? Well, a crisis like this makes sure that some sorts of innovations are happening. For example, how many people used Zoom 4 years ago? Had anyone even heard about it? I think Zoom was developed before that, right? Let's see. Zoom video thing. Yeah, it was developed in like 2011. How many people knew about Zoom before that? Okay, so a lot of the things that is now possible to do, thanks to this pandemic, something that a lot of companies realized is that when you are going to have like meetings that before they thought, well, we have to fly someone across the country or whatever, then I can just do it on Zoom, which is more effective economically as well. And now, of course, other companies take a hit from this, like airplane traveling companies, whatever, but they make up their losses in different ways. So in a sense, the billionaire class, or at least investors and whatnot, they probably realize that this is a good time to invest in some innovation and innovative thought of how we run things. And then you have people like Elon Musk forcing people back into work. So yeah.
Whatever crisis comes along for its own benefit. I mean, when there's a crisis, there's an opportunity to spend public money. And
depending on the crisis and depending on the nature of the crisis, I think he should specify this.
When there's an opportunity to spend public money, the people who are able to employ lobbyists, the way that most of us employ, somebody to clean our house if we're fortunate enough. I mean, Amazon has 100 lobbyists in Washington, D.C. So, what a coincidence that members of Congress keep waking up in the mood to pass bills, turn them into laws that are useful to Amazon. There is no question that after the 2008 global financial crisis, where governments in the wealthiest
Dead workers can't work. That hurts the download. Oh yeah, definitely, and that's exactly why I'm saying that. What Russell is proposing that is there an incentive for the billionaire class to keep the pandemic going, to keep the crisis going for so and so long. Now, I don't know if he actually believes that the pandemic is real, but let's say he does. Of course, billionaires wouldn't want it to go on forever, because even though they have made a lot of profits during the pandemic, they know that that's a temporary gain, because sooner or later this is going to hurt the downline. So they want things to go back into a more stable, normal thing where they can make money, but it's the whole boom bust cycle, and whenever the busts come in the economy, the billionaires and super rich people and investors, they sort of try to figure out ways to make that hurt them less. Now, they don't care about poor people, of course, but they care enough about poor people when the poor people are the people working for them. They care enough about them to not let them die, because that would hurt the downline, or that would hurt the economic situation of a company. So whether or not they care about the lives about the people working for them, I don't really think so, but I don't think that's necessarily an aspect of the billionaires' ways of looking at a crisis like this.
countries spent trillions of dollars to bail out financial institutions while convincing themselves that somehow it would be, unethical to bail out individual homeowners. I mean, in the States, we had this whole absurd.
Wait. It wasn't because it was unethical. Let me be very clear about that. So,
trillions of dollars to bail out financial.
When the country of the United States, when they decided to bail out big companies, just to defend this from a capitalistic standpoint, it's way more sensible to bail out the big companies that hold the profits and hold the values anyway. Whereas bailing out individual homeowners, that's a super ineffective way of thinking economically about that specific crisis that was in 2008. So that wouldn't make sense, and it would be way more expensive.
Institutions while convincing themselves that somehow.
Now that's from I don't think that's necessarily the correct way of looking at it, because I'm not a capitalist, I'm not a liberal, but from their perspective, that made sense to do it in that way.
Be unethical to bail out individual homeowners. I mean, in the States, we had this whole absurd.
Hello there, Sana. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Argument where Obama's Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner kept saying, "Well, moral hazard. We can't reward people who borrow too much to go, build a fancy new kitchen. Really? So we're gonna give everybody."
Again, I don't think that was a very prominent reason for not bailing out private homes.
This moral lesson that they can chew over for the rest of time, that you can.
Yeah, Russell Brand is an absolute moron. I fucking hate him. I've never liked him.
Wreck your company. You can wreck the economy. You can have Lehman Brothers, and you will get bailed out to the tune of literally trillions of dollars. Bankers will not lose their fortunes, but the homeowner, and we all know people who borrowed too much to build a fancy kitchen, but the homeowner who simply borrowed, I mean, this is a particularly American example, because they understood that I got to live in a good school district. And the only way I'm going to live in a good school district is to pay whatever it costs to get a house in that school district. And because other people borrowed so aggressively, I got to pay whatever it takes. Now we're going to punish those people and we're going to consign them to downward mobility. Well, that's what actually happened. And meanwhile, the lobbyists got really good at figuring out how to turn whatever bailout schemes were available for corporate welfare. I mean, in the UK, bankers got bailed out, corporate taxes got lowered, and then in comes the coalition government in 2010, and they impose austerity on the entire country. So you have, huge parts of deindustrialized, the north of England, famously, everybody likes to talk about, where people lost jobs, their wages went down over a decade. They watched London and the financial center prosper. I mean, that's going to have impacts on whatever ties there are with.
So this is basically like a tale of two crises, because if they hadn't bailed out the different companies, they would have to sort of restructure that whole sector of the economy, which would essentially most likely be a lot more expensive. Whereas if they had bailed out private homeowners, that would also end up being like super expensive compared to what they actually end up doing. Now, with that said, part of the problems of how they ended up doing things is that maybe they should have let some of the biggest banks fail, because they sort of gambled criminally with the loans. So yeah, and part of the issue with how things were handled is that we still kind of feel the after effects of the financial crisis of 2008. Like, we're closing in on like 20 years later, and we can still actually feel some of the effects of it. So exactly how to solve that? Well, rent control in the US would probably ameliorate some of the issues with it. For example, I think that would maybe help to some degree. I'm not 100% sure on the specifics on how to like fix the economy, and yeah,
within society that we need just to have a functioning society. And it also becomes a template for disaster for the billionaire class. And there is no question. I mean, my book gets into great details on this, that the bailouts, particularly in the first wave of the pandemic, were crafted by people who are very friendly to the needs of billionaires. People like Steve Mnuchin, Trump's Treasury Secretary, who was himself, a beneficiary of the foreclosure bubble that followed the last crisis in the U.S., flipped lots of houses for profit. He made sure to bail out, for instance, private equity bondholders in total.
To be honest, I found him alright as a comedian back in the day, and from the brief exposure I had to his politics until before the pandemic, he seemed to have his heart in the right place, anti-capitalist, concerned about social justice, environmentalist, and so on. I think he had a genuine leftist leanings, but now he's found a lucrative grift by appealing to reactionaries on the conspiratorial left. Yeah, and yeah, I guess maybe. Again, I always found him kind of obnoxious and whatnot, and these days I find him to be quite a dreadful soul. He constantly misrepresents a lot of things, and he also goes down the whole globalist thing quite often. And he doesn't seem like, so for example, he seems like he has a lot of anti-capitalist leanings, but he doesn't critique capitalism from a more socialist perspective, if that makes sense. You will never hear him talk about how the proletariat needs to the proletarian rights needs to be expanded, for example. So he doesn't have the socialist framework, which makes him more susceptible, I think, to conspiratorial thinking.
Totally disastrous and climate change exacerbating fossil fuel ventures that didn't even make any money. Money was so cheap for so long that you had all these energy ventures where the business was borrow while you tell people you're going to drill and explore, then just take the money and hand it to shareholders, and then eventually you go bankrupt and it'll be okay. Well, Mnuchin basically just bailed all those guys out. So now we have all these...
Thank you for a very nice stream. I'll check back some other day. Oh yeah, thank you so much for tuning in, and have a great night.
All these completely nonsensical energy ventures that are exacerbating our climate change crisis, and it's just simply not fair. That is very much the story of the pandemic.
If you enjoyed this video, please have a look at Ivory.
Yeah, let's take a quick look at something else here. Let's see if... Does he have anything that isn't like an interview? No, god damn it, yeah.
What I like about Amazon's doorbell Ring is that it provides you security, safer.
Wait, is he seriously sponsored by Amazon on this? Are you kidding me?
Burglar was turning up. You could see them through the camera, and it provides you convenience, so you know whether or not to open your front door. It's a brilliant doorbell, and it's certainly not grassing you up to the police.
New tonight, Amazon may have handed over...
Okay, never mind. He wasn't actually sponsored. Jesus Christ.
...your home surveillance video to police without giving you a heads up.
This is just crazy. In new documents, Amazon admitting it gave footage from Ring doorbell cameras to law enforcement nearly a dozen times this year.
Oh yeah, and also the leftist Russell Brand using Fox News as a source. I'm just gonna put this up here so that I don't forget it.
If you were...
Oh no, the Jordan Peterson thing. Yeah, let's do that after.
Without the consent of users.
My old doorbell may not have been fantastic, but one thing I knew for sure is it weren't behind my back talking to the police. That's one of the things I used to like about the old doorbell. Ding dong! Oh, there's someone at the door, and also it's not going, here, you got no idea what Russell's up to in there. I want to be in charge of the doorbell. I don't want to think that the doorbell's got its own life, where it's like chatting to LAPD because it's got a hunch I'm up to something, like it's a sleuth, like it's a gumshoe, like it's a Sherlock Holmes
okay, get to the fucking point.
Doorbell that's got ideas about justice and what its duty should be. I'm in charge of the doorbell. I don't want the doorbell via Amazon chatting to the police, because that makes me think that maybe big tech companies and law enforcement agencies have some kind of relationship. Is there any...
Wait. Big tech companies and the police have some kind of relationship? Are you kidding me? Dun dun dun. We fucking know. Yeah.
Any evidence of that? Let's see how the mainstream media report this news story.
They offer homeowners a sense of security, and the hope is they'll scare off criminals. Doorbell cameras.
I just hope that this will scare off criminals. I don't have such an emotional relationship as well with the doorbell, do you? I just want ding dong, that's it. And maybe, all right, if what Amazon are offering is a bit of an additional convenience to be able to check, well, no, I don't actually fancy chatting to them. Or even better, some security, like I can see if there's an intruder traipsing across the lawn. But given what we know about Amazon, it's probably best to eliminate any possibility at all that they're accumulating and capturing data and then giving that data to law enforcement agencies, because that's potentially something that could get out of control.
But Amazon's Ring doorbell camera might not be as private as users thought.
You just would assume privacy, isn't it? Privacy from the doorbell. I don't have to ask those questions about other
Please get to the point.
household appliances. You don't think
that the toaster's got a relationship with Pfizer, do you? Like it's relaying all my information. You don't think that my hairdryer's chatting to Anthony Fauci's relationship with any government agencies at all? That's really the least I expect from him. That and just dry my hair.
In a new letter from Amazon's vice president for public policy, he admitted the company had given law enforcement access to users' footage without their consent 11 times this year.
Have you given any information to law enforcement agencies? Yeah, how many times? Just 11 that you can prove? Brian Huseman, Amazon Vice President of Public Policy, declined to agree to reforms including never accept financial contribution.
Yeah, he's probably not at liberty to discuss this with a news source.
From policing agencies, never allow immigration enforcement agencies to request ring recordings, and never participate in police sting operations. When you're purchasing a bit of tech like an Apple Watch or whatever, do you want to have in the back of your mind?
Yeah, you know what? I actually can't watch this shit. He's too obnoxious for me. I fucking can't. You guys are gonna have to watch that on your own. 7 minutes and 40 seconds in. Let's see.
Do you disagree with that analysis? Do you think that that's just overstating the problem and the institutions are actually healthy? Or
I think it's partly a Tower of Babel problem. So I've been listening a fair bit to Russell Brand, who I quite...
Yeah, and of course, Jordan Peterson, with his brain rot, has been listening to Russell Brand.
Like, Russell is very, very smart. He's definitely...
No, he's not.
One of the smartest people I've ever met. He's unbelievably sharp. And he differs in his political utterances from me to a substantial degree, although there's a fair bit of commonality as well. He's beating the anti-capitalism drum in a manner that I tend not to. But there's a specific reason for that. And the reason is that Russell has realized that size is a problem.
What?
And you know, the lefties tend to be skeptical of big government, and the right-wingers tend to be... Sorry, the lefties tend to be skeptical of big companies, right, and the right-wingers tend to be skeptical of big government.
Right.
And I think the right way forward through all that mess is that we should be skeptical of big.
What does that even mean? You know, that's the problem with Jordan Peterson as well as Russell Brand. It's like, oh yeah, we need to be skeptical of big. What does that mean? Like, being skeptical of big government, that's... okay. I'm for big government in some senses and against it in others. Whereas big companies, I don't really see... The difference here is between how lefties look at big companies versus how the right wing is looking at big government, because right wingers has a tendency to be skeptical of big government in the way of like healthcare providers and stuff like that, whereas when a lefty critiques big companies, it's usually because big companies lead to more wealth inequality. So it's a difference between why. Because right-wingers tend to believe that big government is restricting their freedoms, which is not necessarily true. It depends on how or why, what sector of government is big. So leftists are usually against like big government in the sense of like policing being too intrusive. So there's a mismatch in how he's stating the different position, or he's misstating the positions. But that's Jordan Peterson for you. All right.